You
Hey,
can't do it?
no.
You ready? Here we go.
Yeah.
Ready?
Yeah.
Not Notorious. Do you remember that Duran Duran song?
Yes. This is a very Howard Chaykin thing for you to do.
Oh, holy. He loves to croon and at panels and sing old torch songs, and
Yeah, it's the
he's
best.
actually pretty good at it.
Yeah, he is. He's very good. Let me take a second to introduce our guest this week. A lot of people might not know him because he's actually not a published uh, creator as of right now, but we are working on a couple of things. He's my partner at Full Court Press. Ladies and gentlemen, Matt Major.
Pleasure to meet
Yay.
you.
Woo!
Hey, how's it going, everyone?
So
Excellent.
the
It's a
reason why I
pleasure to
wanted,
be here. By the way, I just wanted to say thank you for accommodating my schedule. I do have to work later tonight, so thank you for doing this earlier. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I was complaining last night. I was like, I can't even talk before 7 p.m. So I don't even know what the hell we're gonna say today.
Dude, I get up at like five, well, it's 5:30 now, but dad life. You got to drive the kids around, take them to school and
Wait,
that
what
sort of
time?
thing.
Where are you?
I'm well, I'm in a closet right now, but
Oh well,
I'm at home. I'm at home,
no,
which
but
is
but
in Las
in the
Vegas.
world, in
In the
Las
world,
Vegas.
Las
Okay,
Vegas. Yeah.
all right, got it.
Yeah.
Wait, was that an hour difference between us?
ow, no, that's like
Three.
three.
That is a
Yeah.
3 hour difference.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so it's like 10:30. Okay, got it. All right.
Correct.
For us, it's 1:30. Got it. Okay. Excellent. Good to know.
Yeah, by the way, you might hear a little weird sound every now and again when I get quiet because Michelle bought these spray can things that automatically just shoot like like air freshener. And it sounds like somebody's opening a door and I tried to move it out of the room, but it is what it is. So the reason why I wanted to have Matt come on is because yeah, Matt is very early in he's been around in a while. How we know each other is we met through Project Rooftop, right?
Correct. Correct.
And that would have been at least 10 years ago, if not more. Project Rooftop was a website where Mayday Trip uh, and Chris Arrett, I think, were the ones that started it. Uh, on LiveJournal, they would start these kind of prompts where people would redesign characters. So um, Matt had done a couple of characters and did a couple of the contests and whatnot. And I don't know, it's very weird. Like, I've always had nice things to say about it, but like he kind of like out of the blue said, "Hey, I want to make a comic," like, or I want to do something. And I was like, "Yeah, I'll do something with you. I love your work." And so that's kind of where we find ourselves today. And I just kind of wanted to bring him on because number one, he's working with me almost exclusively right now. And number two, there is something to learn from him in terms of how to get your work out there and how to move forward instead of just drawing pinups, I would say.
You're reminding me, Vito. I used to be part of something called the Chain, and I think the chain it was like a letter writing chain to different cartoonists around America or whatever. And I want to say that I discovered it on the Comics Buyer's Guide, the
Oh,
newspaper that,
wow.
that came out every week,
Yeah.
which was like my favorite thing ever was a newspaper that talked about comics, and I feel like there was an ad or an article or something. And that's how I met a guy in Kentucky named Martin Powell, who's a writer who went on to
Yeah.
write a bunch of stuff. But we co-created The Verdict because I said to him, let's do a comic together. And we did it through the letter writing, and then it graduated to phone calls and long distance phone calls. Now you get on your phone, you can call it anywhere for a
Right.
flat rate or whatever. But back then you had to be very judicious, on the phone and try to keep it, quick because you were paying for it. And then we're mailing each other like Xeroxes of artwork and scripts and all this stuff. No internet, So like in a way, this thing you were talking about with Mayday Trip, and Mayday Trip was Dean Trip, right?
Yes.
Like
Yes.
formerly, right?
Yes.
I think that's why he changed his name because he realized he couldn't compete. But anyway, and then he also did stuff for or
He just,
or they Mayday's a they is they
yeah.
right? They didn't Mayday do something on Activate or
Activate.
one of the
Yeah.
yeah he did they did that's right okay
It's okay,
actually
Dean. You can mess up pronouns. We're still learning. This is a new
We're still
kind of
learning.
new world for us,
I know.
and we're
Well,
trying.
also because I remember Dean as a he, and then
Yeah,
things
yeah.
change.
It's a new,
So
it's kind of a new thing for all of us to kind of, and the thing is, we're showing respect. We're trying to, do it. We're not
absolutely. But with Matt, my question to you, in learning this relationship thing. So did you ever want to? Were you ever a writer, or are you a writer now? Or I evolved into a writer, but I remember I too was seeking writers to draw comics.
Oh yeah, no, I think earlier on, younger years, I was much more a writer than I am now, because I
Mm,
had a lot more opinions. And
mm,
uh, now my creativity and imagination is, as you grow older, at least for me, it starts to kind of dwindle if you're not stoking those fires. So now the writing takes me a lot longer to get into a flow with. It's very once you get there, or at least for me, once I get there, it starts flowing. But to get to that initial, stage, it takes a while. Whereas sitting down at a drawing desk, it's very natural to just sit down and start scribbling something. So yeah, but I'm not really a writer. I do have a few ideas though.
but I will say, in what you just said about scribbling, so
Mhm.
when I launched Activate, which was a webcomics collective on LiveJournal, and it was like 7 or 8 of us would get one day of the week. And so you do a weekly webcomic, and I did like 4 to 8 panels a week while working on other stuff. And so I was concurrently working on basically 2 graphic novels at the same time. One was that was paid, and one was for free. And I realized during that exercise, what I was doing is I was kind of drawing the idea first, like laying it out first, and then if I needed to add words to complement it or to add value that wasn't in the narrative, you know, I
Mm.
realized that I was learning writing secondary, that comics really is a visual medium first.
Oh
So
yeah.
as much as you can do in the pictures, does a lot of the heavy lifting. So as an artist, you are a co-writer
Oh, absolutely.
because of the
I'll
visual
take that
narrative.
credit.
Absolutely, so and also I've learned from working with lots of writers, Mark Wade, James DeMatteis, Jonathan Ames, Harvey Picar, Vito, like everybody does have a different style in terms of writing, I've worked with Keith Giffen. Keith Giffen wrote a cold script that he didn't know who the artist was going to be. When I got handed this script, it was a Justice League Adventures. And I remember reading it going, oh my God, anybody could draw this because of how well written and well
Mm.
conveyed it was. And it's just whatever spin you put on it as the artist, but all the storytelling was in the script, and because Keith is an artist, or was an artist, rest in peace.
Oh yeah.
Speaking of rest in
You
peace, I just got
probably
to say
think
one thing.
visually too.
Oh, absolutely. Totally thought visually. I mean, that's the magic. Gene Hackman.
Yeah.
Dude, dude.
Imagine
That's
waking
yeah.
Imagine waking up and you find out, or you go to bed and you find out that an actress from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which I did watch, passed away. And then you find out when you wake up, Gene Hackman and his wife and his dog,
I know. I
all
know.
found dead.
Yeah.
Okay, wait a minute. The Buffy the Vampire Slayer news is news to me.
Michelle
What happened there?
Trachtenberg, who played Buffy's sister.
Yeah.
Yeah, she
No, really?
39
Yeah.
years old.
Yeah. Yeah. 39.
Whoa,
She
that's
apparently had
crazy.
had some kind of liver
Yeah,
transplant or something, and it's possible that she passed away because it didn't work.
sepsis or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah. And I hate
yeah.
to play the game of threes.
There's already been a third.
Ooh, there's
Who?
yeah.
I believe Roberto Orsi, who worked on Star Trek and show ran a couple of Star Trek shows and stuff,
Oh, I didn't
like
know
the
that.
more recent Star Trek ones.
Not the Discovery, you
Possibly,
know.
he might have executive produced it, but I don't think he like was
Those are
working.
the two Star Treks I've watched. Is original and then Discovery. Oh, and then now New Worlds or whatever it's called. Uh, which is still part of the Discovery kind of,
Sure.
future. I've
Right.
never seen, what was it called? Next Generation and
Next Generation. Next Generation. I was into. I
Voyager.
was into. What's the one that Deep Space Nine?
Right,
I watched
right.
Deep Space Nine a lot.
Deep
Matt, you've heard
Space
of
Nine
Star
is
Trek, right?
supposedly, yeah. I would say I was a Next Generation guy, but that was when it was on the air, so I can't quote any of those episodes. Um, and then I fell off at Deep Space Nine because it wasn't a spaceship. Although now Deep Space Nine is like the critics' Star Trek, right? Everybody
Yeah.
loves that one. There's so much social, political, social commentary in
Right,
that
right.
show.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've never seen that. I've never
And then
seen that.
I watched Voyager a little bit, but wasn't really into it. That's about it.
Yeah, yeah. So, what was the first thing you guys did together?
Oh boy.
Mm.
It's funny, the first thing the first thing I remember that Matt did that was related to my stuff was he had come and visited me and Ray Anthony Height at a comic convention in California, and he presented me with a pinup that he'd done of my characters from Stray, and it was just like first time I ever met him, and like he's just like giving me this like poster.
No, no, no.
Oh,
I gotta back you up. I gotta back you up.
okay,
Second time.
second
Second
time.
time. Yeah. So we actually met in New York at Jim Hanley's.
Oh my
I
goodness, you're right. Yeah,
Yep. So the twins had just been born, and my both my folks and my wife's folks were living in New York at the time. So it was the twins were not even a year old, and so we take this trip to New York to go visit the folks. We were there for a week, and you were so at Project Rooftop after I had submitted a few things. You actually went to my DeviantArt page at the time and made some comments on there, and I was like, "Holy crap, this guy's really nice. He's interested in my work, has some nice things to say." So when I was in New York, I knew you worked at Jim Hanley's. I stopped in, and you're like, and I just wanted to say hi, and you're like, "Hey, let's go get a beer."
yeah,
And you introduced me. Introduced me to Michelle. She was like, "Oh, I like your work." We went and grabbed a beer, hung out for a little bit, and then later on, much further down the line, when you went to when you were with Ray over at whatever convention that was in Long Beach, stopped by to
yeah,
say hi, hung out all day there.
yeah.
Yeah.
Good times. I forgot that happened first.
Yeah.
Yeah, so um,
Long time ago.
yeah, but I don't think we'd ever worked on anything sequential up until
No.
recently, and it was like the thing that Matt had done wasn't for me actually. It was for a backup in the very first issue of Volume 3 of Stray, where it's an old West version of Stray, like a multiverse type of Stray, and that was
I
like
remember that.
we were Danny Faust, really good writer, really good friend of mine. I asked him, "Hey, do you want to write a couple of like 6-page backups?" And he was like, "Yeah, no problem." So he wrote it like the theme of it was, "What is the multiverse of Stray?" And there's like one that's like a fantasy setting. There's one that takes place where he's a villain instead of a hero. There's one where it's a futuristic type of like fascist type of Stray. It's very like they're all very different and very weird. And I knew I had the right guy to write them. And
Was that inspired by like the multiverse
more or
thing?
less like because what happened was I wanted to I commissioned this artwork from another artist by the name of Mitch Ballard, and Mitch Ballard has a very George Perez type of look to his work. And I commissioned this piece that was inspired by one of the Crisis on Infinite Earths covers. I want to say it was number 9. It was like with all the villains, and I was like, "Wow, this is really cool. I should get Mitch to do the Crisis on Infinite Earths number 1, and try to figure out what the Infinite Earths would be for Stray." And I got him to do it, and I started coming up with the idea of not so much a multiverse, but a kind of a time travel multiversal. We need to stop this one bad guy because not one of us isn't enough. We need to get all these different people, and so that's kind of where I was like, oh, let's really dig into it and get Danny and Matt, well, Danny to write them. And so though around the time that we started putting that together, Matt had reached out and said, "I've been sitting on my ass for too long. I wanted to make comics, basically."
Hmm.
I'm sure Matt could elaborate a little bit better than I could. But I was
No,
like,
that
all
was basically it.
right.
This is pandemic time. This is what,
Yeah,
2020 or so?
yeah,
Yeah,
that's
so
right.
I was exactly doing that. I was sitting on my ass and I had an idea. I'm like, so I had been furloughed at work and I had no idea how long I was going to be furloughed. And I was like, this is my time. I got to sit down. I got to start drawing. I got to do something now that I have all this free time. And I was banging my head against the wall, coming up with ideas. So I reached out to Vito. I was like, hey, please write me something. I need to draw. And that's where we started.
Yeah, and then I think the bug hit him a little bit, like I would say like he wanted to draw more. So I was like, all
Yeah.
right,
Oh,
well,
absolutely.
let's not do backups. Let's do an actual story. And then I took your idea, Dean, which was to do one shots, various one shots, instead of like doing a whole long form piece. And uh, I started going through like, all right, let's do all these one shots taking place right after volume 3, before volume 4. What are they? What, like, how do we set up this world? And so I kind of mapped out these separate one shots, and then Matt had the idea, why don't we figure out a way to connect all of them so that it's a one narrative story? And like, even though you're buying one or reading one, you can actually read all of them and have it compiled into one thing so that they all make sense and they all tell an overarching story, almost like Grant Morrison's
Seven
Seven.
Soldiers.
Yeah. So that's what we did. And so the first one he's currently working on now, which I think I've shown you pictures of, Dean, is for a book called The Eyes of Odin, Odin,
Yep. Yep.
which is the office of, I want to say it's diplomacy, the Office of Diplomacy, Intervention, and Negotiation. And it's like this kind of, you would think it's kind of a typical young blood type of government, Nick Fury Shield type of thing. But what it is it's a government agency that has an actual superhero group called the Midgard, and they guard Earth. Midgard being Earth in Norse mythology. And so we took that, and we also mixed it with Battle of the Planets Gotcha Man,
Oh,
and then we took some of the Norse mythology a little bit further, and the leader, the behind the scenes leader, is a guy with a white dwarf star for a brain.
dude, you went from like a 6-page Western to like this sprawling epic sci-fi chaos, Oh my God. That's
Well,
Yeah,
the
but
funny
that's just
thing,
the start.
yeah,
uh-huh.
that's just the first of the one shots. Then Underboss came as a result, and we've talked about Underboss on here before. It came as a result of talking to Matt and trying to figure out things that we could do together, and that's where Underboss came from. But the funny thing is, like, I think this is kind of crucial to collaboration in any medium, but especially in comics, is just that we just started playing to each other's strengths. We just
Yeah.
started talking to each other and just kind of getting an idea for uh, what the other one likes, and what the other one wants to see. And you know uh, part of it is I just wanted to challenge Matt. I just wanted to get him to be his best self and put that forward. And the other part is, it's like, this is fun. Like, this is, it's so
Mhm.
much fun. Whenever the thing about making comics is that it's very easy, especially you guys, because you can do it both. Regardless of what Matt thinks of his writing, you can both write and draw your own stuff. You don't need a writer. Um, but that's where the fun of it, like, you don't have to work in a vacuum, especially Matt being out in Vegas and me being in Pittsburgh, like, we're not going to see each other every week anyway. So to we text each other just about every day. So
I
Yeah. I
like
think
this
I think
just
one go
go ahead.
go ahead, go ahead, go ahead. No, no.
You're the
Okay.
guest. You're the guest.
All right, all right. No, I think one of the most important parts to that is the aspect of play, because we really only ever landed on doing what we're doing right now by playing with each other's toys and figuring these things out. And Vito likes to keep me busy, sometimes distracted. He's always throwing ideas out always, and I'm like, oh, that's so good. I want to get down. I want to start, just kind of imagining what that looks like. A lot of character design. I love designing characters. So there's a lot of that. He's constantly throwing new characters at me, which is very challenging, keeps me going, and sometimes distracted. But there's that aspect of play that just really keeps the ball rolling.
Well, I was going to say to that, which is, sure, I've evolved into a writer and to the point where I prefer to write like plays and movies and stories versus even writing comics. Although when I write comics now, it's very qualified, it's very crystallized because I've been doing it for so long. But what's good about working with another writer is that I probably only play to my strengths. You're talking about writing to one's strengths,
Mhm.
but then challenging them. I think that is the key, is to constantly be challenged to the point where I try to put on the other hat as a writer and go, all right, let me challenge Dean the artist now through Dean the writer, you know? And it can be very frustrating, but also you try to break stuff and get there. And then because you keep talking about Las Vegas, I don't know if you ever heard the story. Um, Gilbert Hernandez, I think
I'm
lives in
familiar.
Yeah,
I think lives in Nevada, right?
yeah.
Or Las Vegas, maybe. He once told, I think, me a story, or maybe I read it, I feel, or maybe I heard it, whatever, that there was an inker. I don't think it was him, but that there was an inker in Nevada that was running really late on pages, and the editor kept calling, like, dude, where are the pages? You're supposed to be inking the pages or whatever. And he used the excuse that the weather was so humid at that time that by the time he dipped the brush into the ink and moved it over to the paper, it had evaporated. He was having a really tough time.
Uh,
That's
that's
brilliant. Too bad
hilarious.
you can't do it now
Yeah,
with like digital stuff.
I know, right? I love that story.
power
I
outage,
went to
power
Las
outage.
Vegas once, and man, I'm sorry. Well, it was a Comic Con. It was Wizard World, Las Vegas. So I
Mhm.
was either in the convention center or I was like, where people go to gamble away their lives. And like I didn't get to visit the town or the world, the real life of Las Vegas. And man, I was like, I don't want to come back. I was so depressed. It was depressing to walk into a space, a vast space where there is no time, and
Oh
you
yeah.
just see
No
people,
windows.
no windows, and then everyone's looked like slaves because you could wear a lanyard with a card that held your money on it. So nobody would take the lanyard off. They would just like be kind of hunched closer to the machine with the card
Mm.
stuck into the
Mm-hmm.
slot, and then just
Yep.
keep hitting the button to lose more money, lose more money, lose more money. And then people with oxygen tanks who clearly were like either had anxiety or they were just bad smokers or something, and they were trying to breathe their last breath in these spaces. And I was like,
Yeah.
get me out of here, man. you know?
On top of that, now the whole town, or at least the strip, smells like weed
Oh,
because
well,
it's
it's
legal and it's
legal.
there. There's a dispensary everywhere, so the entire strip just smells like weed. And listen, I'm not against smoking weed, but just to be out there all the time smelling that,
Well,
it's
I don't care if people listen. I have I don't smoke, okay, and I have smoked pot in college. I'm just not into it. It's not my thing. The thing I don't like about weed or smoke or anything like that is that it is intrusive. Like when I
yeah.
drink a rocks glass of whiskey, I'm not splashing it into your face. I'm imbibing it myself. Whereas
Can you
people
That's a good way
imagine
of
smoke,
how
putting
great that would be, though?
it.
you know what I mean? Like smoke kind of just goes in the atmosphere and it gets into your lungs. And I'm like, I didn't
Oh
ask
yeah.
for that,
Yeah,
you know?
Yep.
you're smoking together
Absolutely.
instead of smoking by yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, man. It's just wrong. So Matt, what were the kind of comics that you grew up digging or reading and liking? And
Well, I started in the, I want to say 80s or so, late 80s. And I grew up during the Image McFarlane era.
Mhm.
Um, my first comic that I ever remember buying was it was a reprint of a Marvel team up issue between Spider-Man and Captain Britain in like arcades, his whole thing. And that was the first comic that I ever remember buying. I continued on with Spider-Man, but yeah, I grew up in the Image era. Like that, those are the comics that I were the most influential, and that got me hooked. But I remember the very first artist that I ever, took note and was like, I should follow this guy was Art Adams. And then after that, it shifted over to Todd McFarlane, that sort of thing. The character that I identify probably the most with, and I will say is my favorite comic book character, is the Jack Knight Starman. Like Robinson's Starman was just very influential for me. It was very of the times. I would hate to go back and reread it right now because I feel like it was, it's so entrenched in the 90s,
Right.
and that sort of just vibe that I don't want to go back and read it and be like, this is kind of dated.
No, it still holds
But
up.
yeah, it still holds
I
up.
reread
Okay,
it recently. It still holds up.
good to know. Good to know. Well, a lot of that stuff I guess very relational, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah. So
It's funny that you
that
said that Art Adams to Todd McFarlane. Obviously, you were growing up in Image Comics, which I didn't grow up on Image Comics. I was
yeah,
aware that
yeah.
it was happening because, what was I reading? I was reading like Ron Wilson, Marvel 2-in-1, and Keith Pollard on the Fantastic Four, and then
Mm,
the emergence of like Bill Sienkiewicz was actually penciling Fantastic Four, and it kind of reminded me a little bit of like a Neil Adams type vibe. And then Moon Knight, then he went over to Moon Knight and then started doing some weird stuff. I was like, what is going on here? This is awesome.
yeah.
Um, but and tons of other artists that were not the Image guys. The one Image creator that survived for me from the original is I feel like Eric Larson has gone next level, with Savage Dragon these days. And I really love that stuff. But what's interesting to me is like Art Adams, when you listen to I don't know, let's say you're into the White Stripes and you're like, wow, what did they listen to? And then you go back to you hear the blues and other stuff and that influenced them. For me, the Art Adams influence would have been Michael Golden, you
Oh
know,
yeah,
Marshall Rogers. I
yeah.
don't know if you ever went back and saw like those Batmans and Mr. Miracles and obviously Micronauts and everything else.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. No, I was aware. It wasn't my thing at the time, but I was aware of it. And I was very, anytime you saw a Michael Golden cover or any kind of work, it was very striking. I think he doesn't get enough credit as is in the industry. Or I mean, not that I'm in the industry, but that I've seen. I think he's one of those artists that is kind of an artist and, a lot more influential than just the mainstream, gives him credit for.
I feel
To
like
me, he's on the Mount Sinai of cartoonists. Like if you had to say who the biggest influences are, and it changes all the time. Have we talked about this,
Mhm.
Vito?
well, no. What I was going to say is that the kind of going along with what Matt was saying is that for a while there, up until I would say the last 10 years, maybe even 15, but that was Garcia Lopez. Like people
Oh yeah.
forgot how influential he was. And
Absolutely.
there's another guy for your Mount Rushmore or Mount Sinai, as you said.
I said Mount Sinai, didn't I? I meant
Yeah.
Mount Rushmore, but it's probably because it's comics. It's Mount Sinai, my friend. But no, I think in terms of like the major influences, obviously Jack Kirby's on there, and I would have to give Steve Ditko the boot to give it to Neil Adams.
Hmm.
Mm,
Then after that
mm.
is Michael Golden, and then after that is either the manga influence or the brush influence. And I used to always say Paul Pope. So to me, I feel
Mm.
like, and I know there's no women on that, and I apologize, but it's Jack Kirby, Neil Adams, uh, Michael Golden, and Paul Pope. But I also think they all have little bits of Toth.
Yeah.
I think Chaykin and Simonson
Absolutely.
are the acolytes of like Toth and Kirby. And Alex Toth to me is another guy who's super influential, but he's so hard to actually ape that I think he's just influencing everybody in little ways here and there.
Oh yeah.
It's once in a while. Who is it now? Who's drawing with Mark Waid the Batman and Robin comic? Samney,
Somebody.
Chris
Mhm.
Samney. He's got some Toth. You can see the Toth
Sure.
influences.
Another one that I would say heavily influenced, Paul, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but Azacata?
As a
He's
kid, I
currently
think. Yeah, yeah,
as a kid. Yeah, I would say that he just in his line work very, very Toth and his compositions very Toth influenced.
absolutely,
Yeah, yeah.
absolutely. He's great. He's great. He's come to the studio a few times.
Now you got me thinking about the Mount Rushmore comics. I don't think anybody could argue Kirby. I think
No.
that's a given. Um, I would, I mean, I could say Mike Mignola, but that's the same thing as saying Kirby, in a sense. You know what I
Right.
mean?
And
Like,
that's
it's
totes
not the
Kirby
direct
and
influence. Yeah.
absolutely.
Uh, Same thing with Jim Lee. You could say Jim Lee, but I think that's covered by Neil Adams because,
Yes.
like,
Correct. Yeah.
it's an anatomical kind of hyper realistic. That's why I think you keep Ditko up there because Ditko did other things on the page than than Kirby did. Kirby had like his tech, but Ditko when he did Strange and like even Speedball to an extent, the way he used like
You're talking about the lexicon of Steve Ditko's work and the lexicon of Kirby's work has
yeah
definitely seeped. Like they discovered certain things that all of us use now as a shorthand today. You
yeah
know,
it's
even
like
down to you know who should be on the Mount Rushmore, Mount Sinai of comics is R. Crumb.
yeah
Probably belongs up there.
Mm,
yeah,
mm.
You know,
and then like
So
for like for manga, I would say it'd be Toriyama. Uh,
to me, it's Katsuhiro Otomo or
oh,
Otomo
definitely.
Katsuhiro,
He's
but I
my
don't know.
favorite, but I would say Toriyama only because of the breadth of his work. You know, like
Right.
the amount, like you got Astro Boy, you got like so much. Like it's just,
Yeah.
I think the breadth of his work kind of influenced everything, even Otomo. You know, like, but I love Katsuhiro Otomo a lot, like
Right.
a lot.
So
Well,
are
you
we just talking, if we're talking about the Mount Sinai of comics artists, are we talking about just the influence they've had? Because there are some artists that I think have been very influential, if not always particularly good.
like what?
Oh, you mean like, well,
Like,
okay, do
I
it.
mean, the Liefeld.
Yes.
Liefeld is
Good
very
point.
influential, not necessarily good. And I read a ton of his comics, and that was my age. That was my
Yeah.
generation. We read a ton of, and he was very influential in the way that I was drawing at the time.
So my what I finally arrived at, and I have no problems with Rob Liefeld is he's a very funny guy. He's going to town right now on Marvel and Kevin Feige. I don't know what's going on if you listen to his podcast. But I was just not a fan of the work, right? And
Yeah,
he did do the work, and it wasn't my thing. But what I realized years later, I think one part of the attraction, and you can speak to this, Matt, is that if you looked at Neil Adams, it was intimidating. If you looked at Art Adams, it was intimidating. Michael Golden. I wouldn't necessarily say that's true about Jack Kirby, although I am intimidated by Jack Kirby. People can really render, you know. What was great about Rob Liefeld is he was unintimidating, and you felt like, oh, I could do a comic. Hell yeah, you know,
100%, 100%, 100%.
right?
Yeah, all you got to do is throw in a whole bunch of hash marks, and you're good. Some
Yeah,
pouches and whatever. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you look at his work, and you're like, I can do that. That's
yeah,
what I can do. And he is at the top of Marvel at the time. He's running Marvel with his art. So
yep,
yeah,
yep.
Yeah,
that was a part of the appeal. Yeah.
I think the thing about Liefeld is a lot of it is I don't want to say swagger, but attitude. You know what I mean? Like I think
Totally.
he didn't have to necessarily be the most talented guy in the room, but he carried himself like he was, and I think that took him further than not. You know, I think he taught a really good game. You know, and the thing is, attitude being what it is, he sold books. Like I can't like people would when I would work at Hamley's, people would say, "Oh my goodness, like he sucks. He's the worst thing. He's like this, whatever." And I'm like, "Yeah, but he sells, man. Like I can't. If it were the case that people are hate buying his books, I would understand. But that's not the case. People loved buying his books. So
You know, and I equate him to like, you know what exploitation movies are?
yeah, absolutely.
You know, and like I love a good exploitation movie. I love a good, you know, grindhouse B C movie, you know, whatever. And as I also equate Rob Liefeld and a whole ton of comics. There are comics I back on Kickstarter that are clearly like exploitation comic, you know, like in that vein.
Yeah,
And I love that kind of stuff because there is a certain appeal and a certain sensibility. You know, it's when you get too polished or you're trying to get too close to being like a Marvel or DC comic. I'm like, no, 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 no. then work for Marvel and DC if you can, you know. Otherwise, pull it back and throw something else in there that Marvel and DC can't or won't do.
Hmm.
Right? That's
Yeah.
how I feel.
Uh, Remember a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about appointment comics, and I mentioned Rich Tommaso. I finally dug them out. It's called Black
Oh
Phoenix.
yeah,
This
I've seen those.
There's two of these so far. This is the second one. Rich does every story, every ad, like these ads on the back, phenomenal. Like he is without a doubt one of my favorite cartoonists, and talking about Rob Liefeld and influence and um, the Mount Sinai, Mount Rushmore of comics. I wish there were more of these, like, and I mean, like, I wish there were Rich Tommaso clones or Dan Clowes clones or something like that, and also Adrian Tomine, just guys that thought like this. Like, I can't even describe what this is. You know what I mean? Like, he uses three or four different styles, but they're all him. It's so good. It's just good. Like it's
You know what it is? It's like the sensibility of like a European Digest comic, you know,
sort of,
like
yeah.
whereas he's creating his own anthology, and that's actually a space that I'm kind of curious to go into because, like, think about Eight Ball, Dan
Yeah.
Clowes Eight Ball. Like you would get some Ghost World and maybe three or four different other stories, or when me and Josh Dufeld did Keyhole as a two-man anthology. But I like the idea of the one-man anthology, or what unites it maybe is a single artist that writes and maybe works with other writers as well, but all the art, but then the art changes according to the story, you know? And I think that that's a fun prospect and also a great challenge for the artists, you know? So I was actually thinking in terms of Kickstarter, like I might do one or two more or a few more, like, add more story to previous Kickstarters. But I think that I might where I'm honing into maybe is like a Dean Haspiel experience, let's call it, you
Yeah.
know. And I think that there's a lot of Rich Tomasso's doing it, you know. So and I don't know how well these things do, but you don't know until you try. So I don't know.
I think there's two other guys I wanted to bring up for the Mount Sinai conversation. This guy.
Yep, that was the last. What was that again? That was a Teen Titan. Would tell the listeners.
So this is Teen Titans Games. I mean, I'm talking about George Perez, overall. But this book was supposed to be, I believe, with Protector, who was created for drug ads because they couldn't use Nightwing or Robin for some reason in those drug ads. And so I think it was supposed to be Protector in the Nightwing role in this story, but then this came out 20 years later, and they put, like, George redid the art and put Nightwing in there to make it a proper Teen Titan story. The other guy I think that deserves conversation would be Darwin Cook.
Oh God, Darwin Cook. I mean, talk about the Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, Alex Toth,
I feel
Bruce
like he's
Timm.
all of those.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I feel like if you put Darwin on there itself, just by himself on the Mount
He
Sinai,
covers it. He
it
covers
covers Kirby. Yeah,
the Mount
exactly.
Sinai
Like, even,
comics.
and the reason I keep bringing I was bringing him up is because you were talking about the one man anthology. It made me think of Solo, like the
Oh,
DC
I love
Comics.
Solo.
I don't want to say miniseries. It was kind of like a project, like
Right.
Wasn't it like quarterly? Was it quarterly?
something like that. Yeah, and it was spearheaded by Mark Chiarello, who's a good friend of both of ours, Dean. He was the art director at DC. He's currently doing covers, I think, for a baseball horror baseball book that look amazing. Like, and Mark
He's
is
an incredible art director, designer, editor, artist, and I think, was one of the last people to work with Alex Toth, speaking
yeah,
of.
yeah. I
So,
believe he actually spoke to him and got into an argument with him over the phone.
yes, as
But
apparently everyone did.
yeah, but and I think Solo. The thing about Solo that sets it apart from, say, Black Phoenix, your anthology that you're thinking of, is that Solo had Mark at the helm, and it was kind of put together by Mark with Paul Pope, with uh, Darwin,
Chaikin.
Chaikin.
Richard Corbin, I think, did one.
Yeah, I think
I,
yeah, I think you did do one. Yeah.
it was a great, like, it was like maybe 48 pages. And the artist had, I think, Simonson, uh, either Simon was supposed to do one, or remember Simonson came out with the Judas coin,
Yes.
where it was like Manhunter, Batman, Two Face, like all kinds of. He did like a manga story as well, and
Yeah.
I feel like that was like his version of what would have been Solo. And the idea was to kind of let someone just riff. It
Yeah.
was basically your one man anthology where you could play with the DC toys and maybe add your own value. And I had the balls to email or call Mark Chiarello and say to him, "Hey, you know, it'd be a good idea." Well, I was like, he was like, "What?" He's like, "You should let me do a solo."
You know what's funny is not. I remember you doing this. This is why I'm bringing this up. It wasn't all one man stories. Some of them had collaborators on them,
That's
like
true.
like one or two, like like short stories or something like that. And I think I even said, "Tell Mark I'll write one. He loves me."
Yeah, yeah, that's right, that's right. And then he went on to do that incredible Wednesday Comics
Yeah,
project, which was like newspaper sized, tabloid size, one page chapter, like they do on the Sundays in the old days,
yeah,
and then they collected that, and that was cool. He was always and wait, it started off as a newspaper that then got collected
Yep.
into a
right.
book. That's right.
Yeah,
And I remember I think that was coming out when I was first dating Jen, and I was like, "Jen, check out how cool this paper is." And she just treated it like a newspaper, and it tore in half. And I'm like, "Come on, man,
Oh.
why'd you do that? Don't you understand how to hold a newspaper daintily?" you
Hey,
know?
to be fair, it would be destroyed by now anyway.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Which is why they had to collect it into a hardcover.
oh,
So,
that
Yeah.
hardcover. I remember
Matt,
that
have you been
hardcover.
listening to any of these podcasts we've done, right?
Every single one. Every single
Oh,
one. It's
cool.
fantastic. I'm a big fan of the show.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks for coming on.
he emailed me, or no, or I think he texted me actually after Marty's episode, and he was like, "I don't know who this guy is, but you're right. He's fantastic. He's like,
Oh,
Dude,
he's
and
awesome.
he's
and
incredible. He's so inspirational.
Yeah.
So inspirational.
As is
I
Russ.
came out of that, yeah, thinking, oh, I gotta draw more comics. And what's funny is, well, a couple. Can you hear me?
yep,
Okay, sorry, my headphone died. So immediately, well, a couple days after, I went to Ink Pulp, and they're talking about Mahdi. Like I
Right.
think he is going to be a force of nature in the industry. That's my guess. Yeah.
Absolutely. I agree. I was gonna say the reason why I asked was because we sometimes spring questions on each other. I don't know if you have a couple. I have some that I was scouring right now. Vito, do you have any a question or two or?
yeah. I'll since Matt's our guest, I just kind of want like I always try to keep it light, and I always try to keep it kind of easy. Except for when I'm talking to Dean and I ask, "Are we lazy, or should I take my shirt off?" Um, but have you like how do I phrase this? How did you discover independent comics other than say Image? Because I don't really. I think at this point we can say that they're not independent. Like, how did you come across like say self-published or creator-owned comics? Like, what do you happen to remember that?
That's a good question. Oh, so I would, I don't know. I mean, does Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles count?
Absolutely.
I mean, honestly, the cartoon led to the comics, which I didn't read any of because I was watching the cartoons. But my first, I think the one that sticks out to me the most would be Stray Bullets.
Oh,
Stray Bullets, just once I discovered it, I just devoured it. It was like the independent comic for me. But uh, I would say uh, the way I discovered independent comics. Oh, I did read Mouse. I read a lot of that stuff, in high school. Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics really opened up my eyes to what comics are, can be, how they're made, that sort of thing. And I would say that is perhaps an independent comic of itself.
yeah.
Would you not?
And that led me to reading stuff like Mouse and Stray Bullets and that sort of thing. Yeah.
You know what's funny? You know how I discovered Stray Bullets and Strangers in Paradise? This is going to be the wildest thing you've ever heard. Wizard Magazine.
Oh,
I don't
Palmer's
know.
Picks.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember how it happened, but like I was because I was a star. I was also a big Starman fan, and I remember I was reading something about Starman in a Wizard, and it mentioned Stray Bullets and Strangers in Paradise in one of the subsequent or previous issues. So I was reading Wizard pretty regularly, and I just took a chance on Stray Bullets. It happened to be the last issue, and I just
mm,
went backwards from there. And like that's totally one of my favorite books. Same with Strangers in Paradise, to the point where I I didn't get it at the end. I got it, like towards the middle of the run, I believe. Right before I went to Image for like a spell and then went back to being Terry. Uh I've every time I see Terry, I tell him that he is the patron saint of all of us. Like he's the guy that we all want to learn from. Like we Charlie McKelvey and I always talk about, let's see if we can just get a panel of Terry on the panel, and it's just the two of us in the audience, and we're just asking Terry questions.
Hmm.
mm, mm.
I would add Jeff Smith to
Yeah,
someone to admire in terms of
Oh yeah.
industry, in
Oh
terms
yeah.
of being industrious and getting those 10 volumes so that you can be in the library with your, and explode across the board and then do color versions and everything else that he did, by universe building. I feel like one of the problems I've had is I've had a very schizophrenic career between hopscotching between memoir, indie, black and white, to superhero, mainstream, color, print to web, the boomerang of both and all. And now in the last 2.5 years, I've come up with four very different comic books by the same guy. Like ergo, the idea of a solo, kind of path,
yeah,
and I mean solo, the comic book we've been referencing,
yeah.
Mm, mhm, mm.
I don't think that's schizophrenic, Dean, on your part. I think that's more um, part of it is changing with the industry as it changes, and part of it is the other part of it. While the changes are happening, you're trying to find your way into the world that is being presented to you. Um,
Hmm.
I think that's everything. I mean, I think that's there's something very pop music about that. Not pop
Mm.
music necessarily, but
Well, I do see them as albums. I do
yeah,
see COVID Cop as, if Prince is putting out 1999, and then he puts out Purple Rain, and then Around the World in a Day, and then Sign of the Times, Love Sexy. It's all the same, basically the same guy with different bands, maybe Revolution and New Power Generation and whatnot. But they do have they coalesce
yeah,
into their own thing, and
right.
I would say you're known as the stray guy, basically. At the end of the
At
day,
this point, yeah, I'm the dog
you're the
guy.
stray guy. You're the dog guy, right? And in fact, you just was Hellhound something that is that who drew
Yeah,
that in?
Hellhounds is like a kind of a passion project that I'm just starting to put together, and it just strung out or sprung out, not strung out. That's drugs. Sprung out from this idea of wanting to do two things. Number one, a commission piece that's based on the dogs playing poker, which, let's be honest, Matt, you're probably going to end up drawing that at some point.
At some
Sorry.
point. At some
Yeah.
point. After
No, no, not
after a few
today.
more pages.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, not today. Definitely not.
Today.
But also because I saw Cerberus, the three-headed dog that guards the underworld, and I was like, oh, too bad there's not like a dog version of like a three-headed justice type of, and I was like, oh, why don't I not just make that? And then I think I even approached Matt to do like his own dog-themed character. I approached Lee Gaston and Eric Bennett, who were kind of like my sounding boards. They're part of my think tank guys that if I have an idea, I go, hey, what do you think of this idea? I'm like, most of the time it's Matt and Charlie, and both
Right.
of them are so busy 99% of the times because I'm giving them too much to do, or in Charlie's case, I'm asking for I'm doing too much for him already. So So I was like, can you guys come up with like a dog themed character? And they both came up with dog themed characters. And I'm like, all right, Hellhound, Cerberus, like, or Cerberus, I should say. Cerberus is something else. Cerberus, let's, like, and then I just like when I saw the pictures, this is the weird thing about being a writer sometimes is that I'll have an idea for a picture or an image, and I can't visualize it until somebody else visualizes it. Um, every now and again, I will cop to using an AI, like Midjourney, an AI generator, but I don't use those like you see other guys on Instagram putting them up as their art. I'll use that and I'll say, Matt, what do you think of this? And Matt will look at it and he goes, I know exactly what you're going for. I can see the things. I like this thing. I like that thing. I don't think this works. He's got an extra finger. Don't use that. That kind of thing. And then
Right.
Matt will take the image that I generated and he'll make it ours. Do you know what I
Right.
mean? Like
Right.
like it sure, I think I totally agree with the discussion about AI being detrimental to the industry in the sense that it takes money and work away from real artists. I agree with that. Um, what I hope that anybody listening and watching this, gets from me is that I see it as a tool, and I'm not going to use it to make my own books, but I am going to use it because I can't, like, I can draw very limited stick figures or headshots. I can't draw very well. Dean will attest to my OMAC that I did for Jack Kirby Day a couple of years ago when we were in the studio. And he was just like, yo, that's fresh. You need to just keep drawing like that. No, dude, I am not.
You need to keep making me laugh at you.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why I will use an AI generator for this type of. But again, like I will take it and I will give it to an actual artist and say, this isn't real until someone else sees it like you and can see the benefit of what I'm trying to do, and we can make this ours instead of like making it the computer.
It's an interesting. You're making me rethink some stuff because at the one hand, I'm bristling at the idea of, oh, just type it on and write some prompts, and they'll throw a bunch of stuff
Right.
together, and then you can tweak it from there. Well, meanwhile, I'm over here, and I almost hesitate to show you because I don't want to spill too many beans here, but I'm working on a character. I mean, it's been talked about. Tales from Aerotech.
Mhm.
Aerotech is a comic.
It's on
Uh,
Kickstarter, right?
it's on Kickstarter. That's that's the comic that I read. It's a lot of fun. In fact, the first page is like, Jesus Christ already. um, but so he asked me to write and draw a story, and I was trying to think about what can I add to this, and I came up with there's a section of Aerotech called Hero Tech. I just added an H. And then I came up with a guy named, instead of GI Joe, it's AI Joe, right? Like artificial intelligence Joe.
Nice.
And then without giving too much away, he, when he's not learning how to, when he's not studying the art of war and there's no one to fight, he watches rom-coms and he loves Annie the musical, right? And he realizes, oh, I don't have a girlfriend. So I then added the idea, if you ever read OMAC #1 and you open up the first page, it's terrifying because it's a box of woman parts, right? And it's called Build a Friend. So I decided to play with the idea of, oh, build a girlfriend, right? But I need to come up with the design of AI Joe first. And I guess I will show briefly you guys, just for the discussion, behind the scenes, as it were, of what this stuff looks like. Hold on. Do I have, he's hanging up. Nope. 1 second. Sorry, I know we're killing time here. Maybe it is here. Okay, yes. So I first came up with, I was playing around, I wanted him to be like some 70s dude with an afro or
I
whatever.
remember this character.
I just don't know. And then I was playing around more. Again, these are just sketches, right? They're not like anything that's
Those are some
like,
very clean sketches.
well, finally thank you. I finally arrived at that, right? I was like, this is my man right here. But then I thought, oh, I don't know if he's the right guy. And I love this character so much and this design that I'm just going to keep him for now, And then I came up with this guy that I was thinking of like OMAC and the Gladiator.
Oh yeah.
like Doc Savage underneath the mask and like
He's
an
got a
American flag.
American flag hanging off his belt and a
Yeah.
centurion helmet.
And I'm like, I like this guy too much too. So so I finally came up with, I was like, wait, this is a sexy comic. So let me do this. So I looked up this, there's a singer I've been listening to named Don West from Australia, but he sounds like someone out of Motown from the 60s or 70s, right? Check him out. He's great. And so I decided to take a picture of him. Hold on a second.
I love
And
it.
here we go. So I'm looking at this dude. I'm like, first of all, this guy, when you hear his voice, you'd be like, what? There's no way this guy is singing these songs, right? But
Right.
look how cheesy and yet awesome this guy looks, right? Like he's broad. He looks like a superhero. And
He does
then
look like a superhero. You're right.
Jack Kirby
He
did
looks
this
like a wrestler.
one-off. Jack Kirby did this one-off. Well, he did an issue of some Captain America annual. He did like these different like versions of Captain Americas, and I
Yeah.
always loved this Western-looking one, right? So ultimately, I cheated a little bit. I can't show you this other drawing because it's just all naked. And I arrived at like a Don West Captain America
With a cop
version of
or jockstrap,
this.
I should say.
It's a jock strap, and then basically, I just inked this last night. There's some stuff I don't think I can show at the bottom here, but there's the part of the first page
Oh, it's
of this
fantastic.
AI Joe
Oh,
guy, and then you see the doll like the. So
yeah.
he's about to put together. So this is I'm doing an 8-page story for Aerotech and having fun. But going back to the conversation about developing and designing, I wonder what would have happened had I been. Let me type in a couple of these things, and would it have come up with that drawing or those 3 different drawings, or probably something completely different?
Probably
It
somewhere in
is weird,
between.
but it is weird because in my own brain I feel like, and even though you can go online and get reference for this and that, and then, you're doing kind of the same thing that the AI is doing. You're just collecting different references and then sitting at the art table and trying to figure it out versus it doing and taking days versus taking minutes to arrive at something that kind of looks like what you're thinking of.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, if there's a larger discussion about AI, but the AI itself, it's basically doing what we as artists have done throughout our lives. We're taking swipes. I mean, I grew up swiping Eric Larson, I grew up doing swiping, Tony Harris. I swiped all these guys. And then I went to art school for a year. I learned, unlearned all that stuff. But it's taking all of these different influences and it's eventually like melding it into its like these AI programs are not complete yet. They can't do what they're supposed to do yet. They do it well enough, but they're not there yet. They're still in the learning phase, but it's doing basically what we as artists have done through our lives is taking our influences, putting it down on paper, adjusting it, and then creating a style that works for us, that, works, with at the speed that we go, at the quality that we want, and all of that. So I see these AI programs as kind of like, babies, toddlers in their artistic career.
Absolutely. And I remember going to the Brooklyn Museum when there was a Norman Rockefeller show, and he used to do the covers for the Saturday Morning Post, I think it was called.
Saturday Evening
right?
Post, yeah.
Saturday Evening Post. And it took 7 days to do that cover. And the reason why is because he had to get the concept, what was going to be in the issue or whatever. And I saw the whole process. And he would like have to hire actors and rent props and then take pictures, develop the pictures, use that as reference, change the lighting, figure out some design so he could paint the thing or draw it, then paint it, and then arrive at a cover. And I kept thinking, I mean, I hope they were paying him well, because that was a full-time job to do one cover once a week,
That's very,
And again, AI would have done it in 5 minutes or a version of it.
And he did all that work. He did all that work, and during that time period, it wasn't even considered art. It was, commercial art was just commercial art. He got no props back then.
Nope.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to justify the use of it or say, you guys are holding on, you guys are gatekeeping, you got to let go and accept. I'm not saying any of that. All I'm saying is that for me personally, it's something that I use to visualize something and take that visualization and give it to an artist who can then get closer, because I think the thing that AI will never get is humanity, that had seven fingers or whatever, or extra teeth in the mouth of a smile or whatever. I think that's
But
where
but before you continue, I think that's where AI is interesting for me. Just like the kid in Toy Story 1 who's breaking all the dolls to make them something else,
Right.
like, so the seven fingers, four fingers, 20,000 teeth, that's cool to me, like, go that way, man. Like my friend Peter Rostovsky, who's another artist and cartoonist, on Instagram, we all send each other videos. Me and
Yes.
Vito have a thing going. It's nuts.
I'm promising everyone watching this right now, and everybody probably going to have to do just a video podcast, not an audio version of this. But I'm going to put up our Instagram messages, and we're going to play the videos on the show.
It says way too much about us. I would not. That's the one thing I don't want to talk about, man. But I was saying, Peter will send me like clearly AI generated movies and this and that, and I always bristle. I go, damn it, don't feed the machine, don't share it. And I'm always like, damn, this is kind of cool. Like, or it's so freaky and weird, and there's something to it,
Yeah, it's fun. Like I said, I'm not trying to justify it to anybody, but like Matt and I use it, often. Like I will use something and I'll send Matt a design and go like, there's something here, isn't there? And he's like, yeah, there's something there, but it's missing XYZ.
So we're recording this conversation on February 27th, 2025.
Mm-hmm.
Guarantee a year, maybe two, Vito won't even remember our names, as he just like works with AI, the artist, and he's typing the prompts.
Yeah, I'm everybody that watches this can probably tell I'm useless without an artist. Like it's funny, like when we were talking to Marty and talking to Russ, and even to an extent talking to Matt today, it's like, not that I'm quiet or that I realize that I'm just like, my part in the conversation is minimal, but as a writer only, not just a writer, I mean, I letter, I edit and everything, but as a predominantly just a writer, I'm constantly feeling like you have to justify yourself. Or justify why you work on a comic, because it's so visual. Like, why don't you just write a book? And yeah, why don't I just write a book? But there's something, I love comics, man. Like I can't not write a comic. Like sometimes I'll have an idea for a screenplay and I just, start writing it, and I start going through final draft, and I'm like, this makes much more sense as a comic, not for budgetary constraints or anything like that. It's the mechanism in my brain sees it that way, and I can't unsee it that way.
But also, I mean, according to Matt and the conversations I've had with you, Vito, over the years, you're kind of like a Stan Lee in that you just, and so is Charlie McKelvey, that you just have tons of ideas that you're never going to get to.
I literally texted Matt, was it yesterday or the day before, Moon Spider. just the words Moon Spider. Yeah. And like, why? Like, why? And like you're saying, oh, Vito, you're distracting me again, and I am, and I'm being a terrible, partner, terrible collaborator or whatever. It's just that I just like, I couldn't remember the name of Arachnite, which was an amalgam of Spider-Man and Moon Knight. And I just go, Moon Spider, just like out loud, like at the dinner table to my kid. And I just looked at James and I go, Moon Spider. And he's like, what? And I was like, texting Matt right then and there. Like, just stupid. Like, why? Like,
and why are you doing that to Matt? Why are you doing that to Matt?
Yeah, how dare you give me all these fantastic ideas to play with? How dare you?
Well, I was going to say, is the reason why I brought up, like, you're the guy known for Stray, right? And yeah. I don't know exactly what I'm known for. I mean, one could argue the Red Hook. If anybody's heard of that, to me, I used to think it was Billy Dogma, but where's the Billy Dogma comic? Now I'm doing COVID Cop, Chest Face, whatever, right? But with Stray, so when you're doing Underboss, when you're doing Odin, and whatever the hell else, Hellhounds and everything else you're doing, is it part of the Stray universe?
Well, it's funny. Matt and I have come up with a kind of adjacency, and we call it the Stragerverse, because it's all Matt.
Yeah.
playing in Stray. So Underboss is Strangerverse, Odin is Strangerverse. The Theory, we have a Theory one shot that we're going to get to at some point that I've already written. That's part of the Strangerverse, and it's not that it's separate from Stray, but it's more inclusive of Matt and Matt's other IP of his own. So,
oh, interesting.
I believe he's going to do some one shot, not one shots, backups that would be collected as a one shot at some point in these one shots. So, yeah.
Wait, now what's the word you're saying? Stray something verse?
Strayjor-verse. So, Strayjor.
Oh, the Stranger verse. Got it. Because I'm gonna say another thing, and this doesn't sound nearly as sexy, is the gone astray verse. You know, like that's part of what's happening in here in some way. You know, like
basically.
But also because it's about I hate the marketing and the branding and all that stuff, but. You know, it's like, oh, here's another. That you have your World War Mob story. You know, like, so like, and then I guess Matt has his characters and stuff. So it starts to expand, and then there's Charlie McKelvey and Zion. You know, like, it starts to get on the one hand unwieldy, and also I don't know if readers actually care if this is part of that or part of this. They just want a good story, hopefully. You know, and at the end of the day, I think what were you saying, Matt?
Oh, I was just saying, hopefully. I think we should, as an industry, go into a direction where it's just about the story. Like, if you want, and that's what comics used to be back in the 30s, right? They didn't necessarily were interested in keeping continuity. Things would cross over whenever they wanted to or not, you know. And if you want to make it a headcanon, make it a headcanon. That's fine.
And then Stan Lee created the No Prize. You write a letter, you point out like, hey, you know, there's a continuity. It's like, and then here's a letter with nothing in it. Okay, that's what
exactly.
You get.
Yeah.
But it's funny you're saying that because I've fallen in love. Like Vito and Charlie kind of were talking about some Gold Key characters, and you know how they want to maybe resurrect some stuff.
Oh, before you go any further, Matt did that art for me.
Oh, that was awesome. That was great.
You.
Okay, Matt. So that's you. Okay, so. And I was kind of looking at the Gold Key characters, and I think you guys cited one character to me, and I said, actually, no, I think I like this other character.
Right.
Oh, it was Turok, right?
Yes.
And I was like, no, actually, I like Mighty Samson. And then you made me spend money. I went and bought the first 3 of 4 volumes of Mighty Samson, and I started reading them, and I love them. And the thing that's really great about Mighty Samson is a couple of things. It was only 32 issues. In fact, I think 3 or 4 of those issues were reprints, so really it's less. Only that, and then of the original run, and then each issue was standalone, right? And I love a standalone comic, right? Like to your point, right? And so what I'm doing right now in Kickstarter is, yes, this might be actually part 1 of a 3 or 4 part story, but it's enough of a standalone comic that hopefully it's satisfying. And then the next time the quote second issue comes out, I'm not calling it number 2 of the title. It's the name of the character or something, and then it might have a little subject line or in the indicia that it's the second one. But that's not how I'm trying to sell it, because I think part of the problem that Vito faced with trying to crowdfund Stray is like, now we're crowdfunding issue 5 or 3 or 4. It's like, but what about the first one? Well, they're in here. You can buy them here as well. But I also think it makes people, you know, when you're a kid and you're getting a comic book off the newsstand at the comic shop, and you're at a comic shop, there are back issues. You can go get them right now, usually, hopefully, right? But in crowdfunding, it's a whole different industry and mechanism, you know?
Yeah. I would say that you are kind of responsible for, like I said it earlier, you're responsible for the one shots that I had come up with. And it's a discipline, especially after you spent so much time. Like, I've started writing professionally with a 5-page story that Dean drew. You know what I mean? So I had to learn how to be economical with like my story, and like you have to figure out what kind of story can you tell in the amount of pages that you have to tell the story. I did a 3-page Scooby-Doo story once. You know, those aren't easy. Like they're a discipline unto themselves, and I figured out how to do it. When I did FCHS for the chemistry set, which was the kind of collaborative version of Activate. Activate was single cartoonist, with one or two exceptions. The chemistry set was writer artist teams. So I had done Stuck with Tom Williams, who listens to the show. Hi, Tom. And then I did FCHS with Rachel Freire. And with Rachel, we were trying to, I figured out, I don't know how, but I figured out how to do a story as comic strips, like for a newspaper, and how to make them so that if you put them on a page, 3, 6, 9 panels makes one page. They all tell the story consecutively as you go. So as you learn, you start learning different things and you start teaching yourself different ways to tell the story. I kind of got too big to fail in a sense. And I started doing like plotting, like you said in one of our other episodes. Didn't you plot 50 issues of Nightwing? Yes, I did. Why? I don't know. I enjoy Nightwing. I just wanted to, know that I had that ready. And I plotted 50 issues of Stray as well. And recently I've been talking to Sean Isaacs, my co-creator. He's like, I want to finish Stray sooner rather than later. So we're working towards that last storyline and, to try to make that happen within the next 5 years or so. Just because there's so many other things I want to get to. I don't want to sit on Underboss. I don't want to sit on Odin. I don't want to sit on the Theory or Trigger Happy one shot that we have as well. Like I want to tell these stories now. So going to your point, Dean, like doing the one shots, I'm having to train myself how to tell a story in 22 pages or 20
Absolutely.
pages or whatever. And it's easy. Sure, I know how to do it, but it gets harder the more you get away from not even the more you get away from it, the more ideas you have, the more stories you want to tell. It gets complicated. So it's now an attempt to uncomplicate things.
Absolutely. And I feel like some of the best, like there's the world building stories like Star Wars, Star Trek, Game of Thrones, all that stuff. And then there's that 90-minute movie that's about one thing that you literally can say, I know what this is about. And they got to get from A to B. Or look at Fury Road, Mad Max Fury
Mad
Road.
Max.
What's the story? He goes to get water and there's no water, so he has to come back to where the other water, and yet it's all this other, the journey of getting there, and then you have to turn around and get back, and you've learned a couple of things through the characters about the truth about this or whatever. But action-wise, it's just the simplest idea in the world,
right?
Because they know you're gonna have fun with all the other stuff.
Like a Ricardo Delgado, am I saying is it Ricardo Delgado? Like his Reptile or Hieroglyph or whatever? It's not so much about this. It's about the process. It's the journey. His books are basically they're not there's not too much plot to those.
Wait, who's
it's
this?
just follow.
Who's Robert Delgado?
He's an artist. He did the two that I'm familiar with are Reptile, I think was what it was called, and then Hieroglyph.
And these are comic books?
Yeah. And Reptile is just following dinosaurs. It's just following dinosaurs. That's all it is. But the way it's done is so captivating. Same thing with, Mad Max Fury Road. Very simple.
Yep.
Very simple, but just amazing stuff.
Yep.
And going back to the conversation about creating one shots, Vito will attest to my love for Bluey. I love Bluey, and there's so many reasons why I love Bluey, but the number one reason is that there is so much packed into 8 minutes. They're 8-minute episodes, and they're fully formed, and there's so much depth to them. And that is so hard to do, and they've just done a ton of these, and it's just amazing work.
That's something that's for children, right? Because I'm an adult. I'm allowed to.
No.
All ages.
Yes.
Best if you have a kid first, but anybody can get something out of Bluey.
There's an episode where they go to the beach. It's like a 3-episode arc, basically, where they're at the beach, but the story is not the arc. And the first part of it is the mother can't calm down. Basically, she's too excited and too involved in trying to make everything perfect. But the second episode, there's a part where the father, Bandit, is staring at the ocean, and like it kills just him staring at the ocean, and like there's so much pathos and so much
Mm.
built into it. And like, yeah, I've watched all the episodes leading up to that, and I get why he's doing that. And then like being a parent, I get why he's doing that. But like I literally start like weeping, like, and it's an eight, like you said, it's an 8-minute episode.
Oh, I gotta watch this. I gotta get these.
They're
All right,
amazing. Like they're
so
funny. Like they're not for kids. Like they're for kids, but they're not
There's
just for kids. Is what I mean.
there's
right,
a
right.
whole episode. There's a whole, just to cap off the Bluey thing and how it is all ages. There's a whole episode where the parents are hungover. The
Yeah.
parents are hungover and the kids are playing on top of them, and that whole situation. So yeah.
That's great. That's great. Well, I did have maybe a question, but are we
Yeah.
running out of time? How
No,
we
good.
doing?
Let's do the question real quick.
And before we do my question, Matt, did you have one?
I'm drawing a blank.
Okay. So I had three, so I'll just do the one. And Vito, I think I sent this to you. Sometimes I'll send you an email with a topic,
Is
right?
this the Vince Gilligan one?
Yeah.
Oh, this is very
So
good.
in the Hollywood Reporter, the headline was Vince Gilligan calls for writers to cut back on villain stories amid current political climate. Quote, they've become aspirational. So let me also qualify this. So basically, the guy who wrote and created Breaking Bad, where you
Better
watch
Call Saul.
a
Yeah.
guy become bad, even though you're invested in this guy, obviously, and Better Call Saul, who I think is, I could have also titled Better Call Saul Breaking Good, man. So, but I think years ago, when I was more in my raw punk phase of making comics, I used to have very bleak endings, and I used to have like shocking, gross, whatever horror type thing. And then at some point I went, whoa, 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 wait a second. What am I imparting here? What am I trying to say? Yes, the world is hard and can be ugly, but I wanted to leave the world with a sense of hope, or at least leave the story with a sense of hope for the world, or humanity. So with that in mind, when I saw that headline and I saw Vince Gilligan asking for us to, we write these great villains. And in fact, we bring up Thanos all the time because Thanos was half right in some ways, or I understood where he's coming from. You understand where Magneto is coming from. A good villain, the reason why they're good is because you kind of can understand them, somewhat, you can relate to the way they think a little bit. But we have made our villains really cool to the point where he used the word aspirational, and now he's calling for people to say, no, make heroes aspirational. A hero, I guess, is supposed to be aspirational, but sometimes we knock them down because, what are you, a knight in shining armor? If I had powers, if I had the ability to whatever, what would I do with it? And that's where a lot of our comics writing comes from these days, is you don't necessarily want to help other people. That was part of the premise of the Red Hook, was about a super thief who gets bequeathed a certain amount of powers, and then what am I supposed to do this for good people? For good? Why? And then you have to read the story to find out. But what do you feel about that, guys?
Matt, I'll let you take that because I definitely have a couple of points. But
I would say it would have to. It depends on what you're trying to do with your story, right? If you're trying to reflect humanity, then people are going to be bad. If you're trying to make a point, tell a moralistic story, perhaps focus on the hero. Because it's funny that in writing, we put these people into boxes, your hero or your villain. But in reality, we're all just people. So for me, it depends on the story that you want to tell. That's as far as I'll go with that. When you get into larger discussions about good and evil, I mean, I can go forever on that because I'm a very spiritual person. My dad was a pastor. I'm a born again Christian. So everything for me, when you get into that field, becomes a very theological type of discussion, which we don't have time for.
Well, and I think we should at some point. And Vito, before you give your answer, I was going to say, to me, the most interesting characters are the gray area characters, right? Because that is
Absolutely.
reflects more, I think, of us because we're not waking up every morning going, "How can I be a hero today?" or "How can I screw someone over?" Maybe some people think that way, but I do think that there is something a truth to what Vince Gilligan was saying, which is we do admire, like we all love the bad guys, because they're doing the things that we don't want to, we can't do, or we would never dare to do, right? And you kind of put yourself in there, like, well, could I do that? Kind of a thing. But anyway, so Vito.
Well, I have two different trains of thought that I'm going to try to get to as quickly as possible. Number one is that I don't think we can blame the rise of Trump and Elon Musk currently in our world. I don't think we can blame that on Heisenberg or on uh, what's his name, Don Draper. Do you know what I mean? Like
Right,
these are ostensibly hero characters that are flawed and don't act heroic. I get that, but I don't think we can blame what we're living. Like he's talking about being aspirational. I don't think we can blame TV for what our reality is. Um, Maybe we can
I
blame.
think we totally can. I mean,
Well, I was
especially
going
in
to
the
say maybe we
news,
can blame voters and
journalism,
sure, but like I don't
our
think
stories. I think our stories are more powerful than you're giving credit to because
maybe
one could even hazard that the Captain America movies are propaganda,
sure.
or Marvel's propaganda, DC's propaganda. The idea of heroes and villains is propaganda. So I do think it's more than you think,
Yeah,
But
you're
anyway,
probably right. Maybe I just don't want to accept that as a reason for the way the world is right now. The I brought it up on a previous episode too about Stray uh, being kind of like not his father, but also not the sidekick anymore. So he's going his own way. And it's funny. One of my cousin's sons said, "Hey, Stray curses." Like because he like and because I have like bleep and boy in the third volume like I just got rid of censoring it. Um, at one point he yells, "You killed my fucking dog," or "You tried to kill my fucking dog," or something like that. And and I've always made this rule that only villains will curse in my books. And it's an internal rule. It's not a real rule. And knowing that and knowing that Stray will say these words, does that make him a villain? And I think no, that's only because his rage gets to him and he can't express himself in any way other than a bad way, quote unquote. So um, I think maybe heroic villains aren't the way to go, but maybe um, good guys with a little bit of edge to them is a totally different animal. Pardon the pun. Uh, I think, like when you look at when we grew up in the 80s, reading comics in the 80s, you had the Punisher, you had Wolverine, you had Spawn, later in the 90s, like these guys that were kind of like, I don't want to say anti-heroes, even though they are, but like when you're that young, you don't know what the definition of an anti-hero is. You're just kind of seeing somebody that, oh man, this guy is taking the entire mafia on by himself and killing them just like I would. Or um, Batman always lets the Joker get away. I wouldn't let him get away. Like that kind of thing. Um, and I
or
think
where in the X-Men, Cyclops is square and Wolverine is cool, but
right,
Cyclops probably is the right
yeah,
one.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that morality tends to um, grow in a person. Like it's a very simple morality when you're young. Uh, my son has an issue with his math teacher, you know, and like he's like, I had to go to a meeting with Michelle to talk to his principal today, and I was like, hey. I gotta go to sleep early. I gotta go fight your school for you. And he's like, beat up Mrs. Davis, and it's
Oh
like,
my
whoa, 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 slow down. And the thing is, like, morality is super simple when you're young, but as you get
yeah.
older, there's so much nuance to what justice is. Like, I realized one day that injustice is, what makes a criminal? Like, what's the thing that makes a criminal? And I literally had tears in my eyes when I realized what this was. You go into a store, you park in front of a store, you put money in the meter, you go into the store, you're in there a little bit longer than you thought. You come out and someone's giving you a ticket. Justice is you accept the ticket, you pay the fine, you deal with it, you learn better next time. Injustice is what you feel because you just got here. You can throw that out. You don't have to give me a ticket. And that one little moment can switch you into being evil. And like when I realized that injustices are little tiny little things that turn people, like that just click in somebody, and then their entire thinking changes. That's when I realized what a bad guy was.
It's funny. You reminded me. It just clicked in my head. What was the movie with Michael Douglas, Falling Down? Is that what's called?
Oh yeah.
Isn't that? He just had a bad day, like the Joker, right? One bad day. And when they go to his wife toward the end of the movie, and they're like, he's become a sensation because he's snapping, going nuts. And then they go to his wife, and they're like, so he must have beaten you, or he did these terrible, right? And like, you're his ex. And she's like, no, he never did nothing bad to me. But I could see that he could get angry and he'd get upset. Like, it's not always black and white. It's not always like you're a monster. It is that tiny little thing that you said, and I actually had an issue with someone giving me a ticket because I was trying to park my car and my girlfriend's car, and she's out of town, right? And so I'm doing the scrambling by getting to her car, park it over, getting in my car. By the time I'm parking my car, there's someone giving Jen a ticket or her car a ticket. I'm like, whoa, wait a second. I'm trying to park two cars and I'm trying to do the right thing. And they were like, oh, sorry, already. And I was like, you know what? It's and I might have gone a little overboard. And I was just like, that's just not cool, whatever. And then she got loud with me, and I was like, this is your little bit of power, isn't it? This is your tiny little bit of power that you have, right? And then I made it like that, and then we wound up screaming and threatening, and then she was going to give me another ticket from Mike. It was stupid, but I could see how it could go out of control.
Right,
we can go like that, Absolutely. So,
all right, I got to give Matt the flush. Here we go. I know you're not going to hear it on the video, but you will hear it on the audio. All right. Thank you, Matt Major. We appreciate you coming on, and
thank you for having me.
Thanks, Matt.
I think I'm more excited that I got to introduce you to people that will start seeing your work, relatively shortly. So like that's always a good thing. And you're always welcome to come back on, obviously. Maybe not at 1:30 in the afternoon, but
And I think we mentioned Jack Kirby at least once or 100 times. I heard you say I can't even say it. Ostensibly at least once. And,
you really should change the name of the podcast. Change the name of the podcast. It should be Ostensibly.
We got the flush.
Yes.
Oh,
there's only one last thing to do. Yay, yay.
Yay, yay.
Yay, yay.
All right, here we go. Good night, everybody.